Electronics are essential in modern fishing times, and here's how I set them up to be the most efficient. So when you're setting your electronics up for offshore fishing, there's a couple different things that I do to kind of maximize the potential of it. So a lot of it comes down to your split screens. So when I'm idling, I do it a little bit different than a lot of people. I run two 12-inch units, but regardless of what you run, I like 2 units just because that's what I've always got used to. But the way I split the screens, I feel like helps me be more efficient when I'm graphing for fish. I know front-facing sonar kind of dominates nowadays, but still just the old way of graphing, idling to find them, using your motor, and kind of zigzagging back and forth to look for brush piles, look for maybe deep fish on bait, whatever. You still can cover a lot more water idling, and setting them up like this is how I do it. I like to have a map and 2D on one unit. And the 2D, a lot of times when fish are really, really tight to the bottom, like stuck right down on the bottom, you can actually see them a little bit better on 2D than you can on down scan or especially side scan. They're really hard to see on that. But so a lot of times in the winter, especially around here, I like the 2D. So I leave a little small portion of 2D right here with my map. And I'll just kind of zoom in and out on this side on that. But my left one is what I do a little unique. So I've got accustomed over the past years to, I like a full screen of whatever it may be. You can actually take it, I mean, you could take it and split it however you want. You can add the menus, you could have down scan, like down scan, side scan, or down scan and side scan on the bottom. But I actually like to have a full screen of whatever I'm using at that time. I generally idle with my side scan up, full screen side scan. And when I see what I think might be fish or see something I want to look at more under the boat, I keep my speed buttons over here, these little small buttons, programmed to down scan. So I'll just switch back and forth between side scan and down scan as I'm idling when I see something that I want to look at a little closer. And the reason I like a full screen down scan, for instance, when you're idling for schools of fish, I've became accustomed to, I know what type of fish or how big they are when I have a full screen kind of ratio. I can tell, you know, is that little bitty perch, or is that 5-pound bass, or is it giant stripers? What is it? I can tell easier on the full screen than if I was to take it and split it, you know, 10 different ways and have like a small screen or something like that. So it's just more effective to me to have just the full size map than it is have the small little split. And that's how I run it for my idling purposes. And that's how I think you can be more efficient that way. When it comes to the settings, I get asked all the time, you know, what's your settings for your graph? That's the cool thing about these Lowrances is I really don't change much. I change my color palette sometimes. Like sometimes I think different palettes stand out. The timber, you can kind of see the difference there. Like green shows that timber really well, but then it kind of drowns it out. It has a lot of clutter. So I just kind of change it to whatever I think with what I'm graphing, it shows what I'm looking for the best. On side scan, the same difference. I'll just, the only thing I really change is my color palette. And the settings wise, I'm running on 800 kilohertz on the side scan, and the contrast is auto. Sometimes I go up to +1 or +2 if I'm really trying to make fish or anything pop out, but I don't even change that much. I leave it pretty basic. The same auto contrast on here, I'll crank it up a little bit if I'm really looking for something. And one thing you can see this on here is I actually have a little bit of an issue now, and this is actually a good example. If you start getting a little fuzz on the bottom like this, like it's almost like a double reading on the bottom, it's because you got a little angle in your transducer inappropriately. It's either angled up or down and you're not reading perfectly straight. And what happens is I was in some rough water the other day and my transducer probably got bumped and changed a little angle, and I need to move it back. And I like to keep it tilted a little bit so I can idle at higher speeds and keep it vertical. So if you tilt your transducer, the butt end up a little bit, then you can actually idle a little faster because the nose of your boat raises, and you can still read clearly while moving a little quicker at 5+ miles per hour. So when it comes to my front graph, what I like to do is you obviously always need a map. If you're fishing offshore, you need a map to know where you are. So I run my map on my bottom unit and I split it with the 2D on the right. And I know nowadays 2D is almost, it's overshadowed by the front looking sonar, but I still like 2D because a lot of times it just shows those fish on the bottom really good. And it's just something I'm accustomed to. I fished with since I was, 5 years old. The 2D is just kind of something I have to have up that lets me see a fish or two, maybe extra, that I may not see on the front looking, or he's just straight up under the boat, and things like that. But then the top I run on my front looking sonar. I've got the Lowrance active target, and I just run it on whatever range is necessary for the time. I mean, if you're in 30 foot of water, I run the down range, you know, on 35 or 40, just to barely have enough to kind of cover that graph and get the water column in there. You don't want too much of the land because that's not what you're looking at. And your forward range on, you can run a bigger forward range on more suspended fish. If you're looking for fish, you know, high in brush piles and stuff, I can see brush piles way out there, but then fish on the bottom are a little bit harder to see. So I'll run a little bit smaller range to see those fish stuck down on the bottom. In the winter here in the south, on the lakes I'm used to fishing, fish will get really, really tight on the bottom. But with that being said, I like to run your map, your 2D, and then a full screen active target. And you could split it if you had, I could split and put the active target on one unit, but with the setup I have, this is the way I like to run it, and this is the way I always have. So it's helps me be a little bit more efficient, and I'm still old school, so I love the 2D on there to be able to look at.